What's the big buzz? What are all the kids talking about?
Well, the NBA really wants you to care about the NBA Cup. That's for sure.
Okay.
We'll see how much that sticks. But really, when you talk to people with different teams, the buzz nowadays is Jimmy Butler, right? And what exactly is going to happen down there in Miami? It's pretty clear at this point that there'll be a few teams that express some level of interest in Jimmy Butler. And now I think the question is, what kind of motivation does Miami have to do a deal here? Like, Miami's playing some pretty good basketball. Jimmy just went for 35 the other night, and we know the Heat, when they just believe when they get to the playoffs they can beat anybody, and they've got a decent track record of they in 2022 they did, right? Like, they got
it's not happening this year. Yeah,
probably not. No, I agree with you. And if you look at their roster, like, Jimmy doesn't fit the timeline. Like, everybody, including Bam Adebayo, is 27 and younger. So you figure the Heat would have to get motivated to do a deal. The question is who's going to be on the table, what kind of offers are there. That's really kind of the most interesting thing, I think, in the league right now.
So I watched the fourth quarter and OT of the game last night against Detroit that they ended up losing in OT. He was incredible in that game. I think he had like a 35, 19, and 12, something like that. But looked like playoff Jimmy was really trying hard. That team has a weird identity issue with Hero, who's been excellent. And it seems like over and over again at the end of games, it's just these Hero 27-footers or Butler. Bam's not involved really at all. And it's just a weird team to watch. It's not a team that's going to win 4 straight playoff rounds. But it seems like, to me, we've seen this go a couple different ways with the guy who maybe doesn't want to be there anymore, or he's got, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Maybe he's not happy the team didn't give him an extension. He seems like he's moved toward I'm actually mad I didn't get the extension, and now I'm leaving after the year. I'm going to show everybody how awesome I am. And to me, I said this on the pod the other day, Houston's the team. And you watch Houston. Were you there for the NBA Cup semifinals?
I was not at that game, no. But I do think, Bill, Houston, they doth protest too much about how they're going to keep this team together, right? Like, every time you see like a quote from Raphael Stone or some reporting coming out of Houston, it's, we want to keep this team together and see what it has. And I get that. I understand wanting to see how a young team fits over 82 games, how a young team plays in the postseason, and kind of using that as a data point to build off of. But if you have a chance to supercharge your roster with a defensive-minded veteran that would fit in pretty well, I think, in Ime Udoka's system and his culture, I think you've got to at least take a swing.
Well, and the other big part is an end-of-the-game guy, which they don't have. You really feel it. Like, they have no chance in an OKC playoff series. They're just not going to be able to get shots they want. OKC just strangled them. It's like, we're going to talk boxing later. It was like watching the boxer who just doesn't let the other guy breathe, and the guy just is trapped in the corner against the ropes, just trying to hang on. That's how I felt watching them offensively. Şengün's probably the safest bet. No, I don't trust any of their perimeter guys. And they don't have that one guy who's like, all right, 1-point game, 3 minutes left, like, kind of take us home. They go to Fred VanVleet. I don't trust Jalen Green at all. Like, you go on down the line. But I like a lot of their players, and I do think they have an identity. And what's interesting is he fits in with the identity so perfectly. So I was saying a couple of days ago about Butler with Rozier, and then VanVleet's expiring's in there, and you load it with guys to make that. They have a bunch of expirings to make it work, and then they have picks. And for Miami, it's just a reboot. They get cap space this summer. Nobody has cap space this summer. It's one of the Brooklyn, crazy things. Like, and one other team, right? It's like Washington I think there's only 2 teams with $30 million and up. Miami could rig this, so all of a sudden they could have the most cap space and be. To me, it's a reboot destination. All of a sudden next year they're a different team and a little more dangerous. And we've seen them do this multiple times in the last 20 years, right? Where it seems bleak, then all of a sudden they're back. So I'm working under the assumption they're trading him. You don't think they would possibly think that they could beat the Celtics and the Cavaliers and OKC? I just can't believe they would think that.
I think they probably think they could be competitive with Cleveland because there are things you can exploit against the Cavs in a 7-game series. They can't believe they're on Boston's level. They're not. And that's really the bar, right? Like, they could look as of right now today. They could extend Jimmy Butler. They can give him 2 years, $113. Like you've got to think till June 30th to do that if you really wanted to. They don't want to. He's 35 years old, and no matter how he's playing right now, like the idea of tacking 2 more years on to that option year, it doesn't make any sense to them. And I get that. Like how many teams over the last 12 months have handed out extensions they wish they didn't, right? Like Denver and Jamal Murray, the Sixers and Joel Embiid even. Like you don't
even.
The worst thing you can do,
that's the number one extension to me.
I was trying to be nice. Like Embiid at least has like an MVP track record. Murray had never even been an All-Star. Like and he was coming off that absolute crap of a Olympic run. There was those guys are just examples of guys you give extensions to way too early. Miami, they're on a different path here. Jimmy's not going to be on it. I think my question would be, Bill, is if like the draft capital move is probably the right way to go. The expiring contract is probably the right way to go. Reboot, use that cap flexibility. But can you get interested in Michael Porter Jr. if that's a deal with Denver? Like
I saw you had that last week. As a Jokic guy, I loved it, and I was trying to talk myself into it. But that can't be the centerpiece. I mean, you don't think that, do you? Is Porter the centerpiece of a Butler trade?
I mean, he's such a good offensive player. And I just think in that Miami system, you could unlock even more in him. Like,
but now I don't have cap space next year. I do that.
You don't.
I'm committed to.
That's what I'm saying.
Those 3 guys.
You're throwing out the cap flexibility stuff. You're going, 2 more years at big number for Michael Porter Jr.
After this year. Yeah.
Yeah, after this year, right. It's a tough call. I love his offensive dynamic. Like just everything he can do offensively, I love. And he's kind of shaken off the injury bug from the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I wonder, and he kind of fits the timeline too. What is he, like 25, 26 years old? All of a sudden, you're adding MPJ in with all these young guys. Throw Jaime Jaquez into that mix. Can you get something better than Porter Jr. in free agency? It would be kind of my question over the next couple of summers. I don't know the answer to that.
You know who would root for that trade is the Celtics, because they'd be like, oh, wait, you're going to have Porter and Hero on the same team in crunch time? This is great. It's like an all-you-can-eat for who we're going to attack. I'm with you in the sense that I do like Porter as an asset a little more than I think other people. The contract, the back issues, like there's real things to be scared about, like the defense, the fact that he's been replaced during games in crunch time for Russell Westbrook for defensive purposes. Like there's red flags.
Wild.
I love that he's played with Jokic for this long, because that's like getting your fucking masters for how to play basketball, right? There does seem like there's more there offensively, but to me, that's a guy I'm looking at a team like Brooklyn or some of the other like Eastern Conference also-rans. And if you're looking at Porter thinking like, you know what? This is a guy who might be a 25-point a game scorer on a different team. Right now he's in the corner a lot, or he's like just trying to play. Jokic and Murray are running everything. So what might that look like on a crappier team? What could that look like on like the Pistons with what we watched, what Tim Hardaway and Beasley are doing and Tobias Harris are doing, that kind of shooting forward spot? What if you put Porter in there? So, listen, I would love to see Denver somehow improve this. I just don't know. I don't think Porter is enough to get somebody like Butler. And then Golden State feels like they shot their wad with the Melton thing. Now they can't put the salaries together. Yeah.
Well, you can still, I guess, rules-wise, put Schroeder into a deal. And I don't know who's going to want Schroeder on the expiring. And they've got the problem with Denver is they have no draft capital, right? Like you'd have to throw like Zeke Naji into that and hope somebody wants him. But man, you watch them, and I've watched a lot of them the last couple of weeks. Like they need something. Like they need somebody with an edge. They need somebody to bring some energy to that team. I know Murray's had a good couple of games, like 48 over the last 2, but he looks awful. His shooting numbers are all down. Jokic, I mean, I don't want to dump on the guy because he's having a ridiculous offensive season, but defensively he's terrible, right? And that's a big reason why they've sunk as far as they have defensively. So they just need an infusion of something if they're going to maximize this, these few years of Jokic playing at an MVP level. And I don't know if Butler's the guy, because all of a sudden you can't shoot at multiple positions, but his edge and his, like the way he plays, I think that would be something that Denver needs.
He's certainly the most fun for the playoff run. I can't believe you said Jokic's defense was terrible. That really hurt my feelings as a number one Jokic lover. Because it's conditionally terrible because he's got great hands. He's jumping passing lanes. He gets steals. Like, he's very active. He's good at breaking 2-on-1s. There's things he does well, but then you watch a game like the Kings last night where they're just getting basically whatever they want, and his lack of rim protection becomes more of a problem.
Well, this is the problem. Among the problems, and I was talking to an assistant coach that went up against him in the last couple of weeks, and part of it is Michael Malone is just running him out there for like 38 minutes a game.
Yeah, because he has to.
If you're carrying that heavy an offensive burden, it's going to cost you something on the other end, no matter who you are.
Yep.
And I think it's costing him there. The other thing I keep hearing, and I haven't been around him personally enough to see it, but people keep saying he's heavy, right? Like, he's not in the kind of shape you've seen him in years past. And all those things have, caused him to go from being a guy that people saw trending towards like an average to good defender. Like, he's never going to be elite, but an average to good defender, to now he's kind of taken a step back into that below average defensive range. And look, it doesn't really matter for their purposes because he is so dynamic offensively, but you look at their defensive problems, and some of them are solved with Aaron Gordon back in the mix, but Jokic, Murray getting killed on the point of attack, some of the guys off the bench not delivering. They're not a good defensive team for all those reasons.
Well, and I think that the too many minutes thing is a big problem too. Is there any other Butler team? Because you threw out Denver the other day. Golden State and Houston were the two I was focusing on in the content I did. Is there anybody else we're not thinking of? Because it doesn't seem like there is.
But I get amused by how many times I keep hearing Phoenix thrown in this discussion, like it makes any sense for anybody to do a deal like that. Like, Phoenix would have to trade Bradley Beal, and Miami would have to want Bradley Beal. And I don't know why.
And he would have to waive a no trade clause, and he's not Bradley Beal anymore. Like, he's if it was 3 years ago, Bradley Beal, I guess we could talk about it, but not the guy now. Doesn't seem like he can play for 3 straight weeks.
No, I see a lot of just, going down through hoops hype. It's like Phoenix interested in Jimmy Butler.
Dallas.
How?
Yeah.
Dallas too. That's another one. Like, that's not going to happen. No, I mean, I could see Golden State taking a swing. Like, Golden State and Denver are the two teams that probably aren't all that concerned about, Jimmy Butler next year. It's all about this year. You want to maximize a window. And if Golden State can get him for some combination of Andrew Wiggins and Brandon Pajemski, then you'd probably jump at that if you're the Warriors. And if Denver can get him, just for Michael Porter Jr. and some filler, you'd probably jump at that if you're the Nuggets. At least you should, because you're not looking at 2-3 years down the line. You're looking at now to win something.
I thought I was at Thursday, I had the Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Golden State. I did a whole thing about it. And I really thought that was going to be how it played out. And then they got Schroeder 2 days later. They didn't get Cam Johnson. And then they're reporting people were saying they didn't want to put Kuminga on the table in a Cam Johnson trade. I was really surprised by that, because the contract that Cam Johnson's on versus what Kuminga is probably going to get in free agency next year, $30 million. I'm guessing Johnson's like at 22. I'd just rather have Cam Johnson. I think he's a better asset. And I thought and that's why I don't feel like that's dead yet, because I think the more you stare at that, the more you think, Cam Johnson at 22 is just a good asset. That's like, if I was doing like top 30 best contracts in the league for non-rookie contract guys, Cam Johnson's in like the top 12, making 22 a year. So I don't think that's dead yet.
Do you think they're holding on to Kuminga, though, to see if there's something better out there than Cam Johnson?
I think they're holding on. The problem, though, you mentioned Schroeder before. I don't know if they can trade him in a trade where he's with other players, because the trade deadline's early this year. It's like February 6th. So I think the trade they did for Schroeder, it's not in that 2-month window where then you can repackage the guy for multiple guys.
I think it is, though.
Did they change the rule for that?
I'm not smart enough to remember all the new rules there, but
maybe they changed it.
From what I heard coming out of this was that they can package Schroeder as for another deal. So it's basically it's the same contract as DeAnthony Melton. The second round capital they swapped means nothing.
That's great then. So they could do Kuminga, Wiggins, Schroeder, and they'd have to find a fourth guy somewhere like Podziemski, who I think they overvalued over the summer. I think was one of the lessons of the summer. That was like they're making basically an untouchable, and he's just been really bad this year. Not totally his fault. He's playing out of position, but he hasn't been good.
Was he low 30s from 3-point range? He's really cratered in that sense. Schroeder's interesting though. I mean, if he gets traded again, would there be 9 teams in 8 years he's been on.
I know. Why do you think it didn't work for him in Boston? Because this version of Schroeder now I really like, but in Boston it just didn't work.
Yeah, it's probably more to do with style of play. I don't really remember all the. I don't think there were any issues in the locker room. He had some of those early in his career, but I think he's moved past them.
Yeah, it seemed like they liked him.
Yeah, and getting moved from Brooklyn is more about like, hey, we want a guy that can't play more than we want a guy that can. So I don't know, but he offensively, I think he's going to help the Warriors to bring it full circle. Like in the short term, I think having another ball handler is good. Having another scorer is good. A guy that can make shots in clutch situations. Obviously, Kerr likes him. I think he's going to help, but I don't think he's untouchable over these next couple of months either.
I really like him too because competitive, a good defensive player, like just feisty. So the feistiness now, you have him and you have Draymond and Kuminga gets a little feisty sometimes. Curry talks shit. Like there's a little more of an identity with the team. The only other Butler I was looking at it trying to figure out anyway was the Cavs. Just is that even, does that even make sense? Do they have the contracts? I just couldn't figure it out. And I'm not confident that they would do anything major anyway because they have great chemistry right now, and I don't think you'd want to fuck with that.
The Cavs to me, they're a great regular season team, right? Like they're built to win a whole bunch of regular season games because they'll play 11 guys, and that's awesome in the regular season, but that's not really consequential in the playoffs. I love Mitchell and Garland right now, but smallish guards in the postseason can get exploited. We've seen it happen even in Cleveland before. So, any deal with Butler and Cleveland would have to, I assume, involve Garland. Do you want Garland if you're Miami? Does that make any sense? That you brought up defensive issues with Hero and Porter. It's the same kind of situation if you bring Garland into that mix. I don't know. I don't think that's the move if I'm Cleveland, but I don't know that I'd make Cleveland a threat to Boston yet either, despite the fact they played really well against them in those two games.
Let me ask you, if you could throw out salaries when you made trades, do you think the Celtics would trade Payton Pritchard straight up for Giannis?
I mean, yes, but the fact that we're even asking that question.
How about Payton Pritchard for Jimmy Butler?
I don't know, man.
This is an unbelievable season that he's having. I mean, this is beyond sixth man of the year. Like his per 36 stats now are nuts.
Incredible.
Shooting stats are nuts. He's in the running for one of the best six-man seasons anyone's had since like John Havlicek for the Celtics. I can't believe what I'm watching.
The short answer to Pritchard for Butler is I think Boston would say no because Butler doesn't shoot threes. And if you play for the Celtics, you have to shoot at least 8 threes a game to or be able to do. I mean, he's been awesome, and what a contract he's on too. Like you couldn't do a Butler deal because Butler's making like what $46 million and Payton's making 8. So
no, you can't even. You can barely put him in any trade. I would say if you're doing best contracts in the league, he's got to be in like the top 3. He might even be number 1. He's sixth man of the year. It's $7 million. And also gives them the luxury of like, oh, Derek White's a little banged up tonight. We'll just play Pritchard. He'll score 29 in a starting spot. It's really great. I mean, the ceiling of this regular season Celtics team when everybody's back, I do feel like they have like a 16, 18 game winning streak in there somewhere before the season ends.
Can you think of a player? I can't think of a player that's had the kind of like 3-year stretch of Payton Pritchard where it's like he's not playing. Joe Mazzulla doesn't like him. He wants to be traded. All of a sudden he's getting opportunity, and now he's in the sixth man of the year. I'm sure guys have had this kind of roller coaster ride, but I haven't seen one like Payton Pritchard. To get to this level, you said a couple of years ago this was where we'd be talking about with Payton Pritchard, where would you trade him for Giannis or Jimmy Butler?
Those were jokes. But
I know.
But no,
I don't think Butler's a joke. I wouldn't trade him for Jimmy Butler. I mean, it's going to come off crazy, but like Payton Pritchard fits what this team is doing. Payton Pritchard can come off the bench and knock down, 6 threes, 2 of them at the buzzer. Like he's just the perfect fit for what they want to do.
Yeah, if you're talking $7 million for Payton Pritchard or 48 for Jimmy Butler, I think for the way this Celtics team's constructed, it really feels like you see this happen sometimes in basketball, in football, and baseball, and boxing. It seems like the game slowed down for him a little bit. He'll have these moments where all of a sudden he's doing old man post-up plays on shorter guards. He's around the rim. He's like, oh, I'm going to do old man pickup basketball and just like shoot a jump hook over this guy. It's been really impressive to watch. Speaking of boxing, big fight this weekend. My guy, who I bet on every time he fights, I just parlay him with football teams, Usyk, is the rematch against Fury. Usyk's never lost. Everybody's been looking forward to this fight. Is this to you? Is this will he finally get the credit he deserves as a main draw fight, or is this what does Tyson Fury have left fight?
I think it's more of a what does Tyson Fury have left fight. I do think that for a broader audience, Usyk is, getting some of the credit that he deserved back at cruiserweight when he became the first ever undisputed champion in the 4-belt era. Comes to heavyweight, beats AJ, your guy, twice.
My guy who no matter where I bet, I lose. 4 or against. I'm like 0 for my last 6.
I get a text from you every time Anthony Joshua fights, and it's usually like, I can't believe I bet on that guy.
Or I can't believe I didn't bet on him, or whatever. Yeah, every time.
Yeah. I think as much as he is getting some of the exposure that he deserves, and I had like a 2-hour conversation with him last month for a story that's coming out on Friday. He's really a remarkable guy with a remarkable backstory. This is more about Tyson Fury and what does Tyson Fury have left in the tank? I mean, he has overcome a ton of stuff over the last 10 years, whether it's off the or outside the ring issues, weight issues, depression issues, coming back from tough fights, a whole bunch of different things. He's never had to come off a loss before. And I talked to Tyson for a while last week. I've watched a lot of clips of him over the last couple of weeks. And I do wonder kind of what is his mindset coming into this fight? Like how much does he have left at 36 years old, which is chronologically younger than Alexander Usyk, but he's been through physically and perhaps mentally so much more. I mean, I saw an interview Tyson did this week where he said that he hasn't talked to his wife, Paris, in 3 months. Like, didn't really elaborate on that, but said he hadn't talked to his wife in 3 months. And I'm watching the interview. I'm going, what? Like, this is a big family. They were on that Netflix series. Like, they are intertwined, those two. Hasn't talked to her in 3 months. Now, maybe it's because, hey, I'm just totally locked in. I don't know if I buy that, but I'm wondering what Fury has left here. Because if you're not 100%, if you don't have your A game, Usyk's going to beat you. I think Usyk is a generational great. I think he's one of those rare guys that only come along once every 20, 25 years that are so skilled, so strong. Doesn't matter what weight class you put him in, he's going to dominate. Big guys, small guys, he's going to beat you with his discipline and with his game plan. And if you don't have everything going for you the right way, you're going to get beaten. And that I'm not so sure about with Tyson Fury.
Well, the interesting thing about the first fight is the scorecards had it closer than I think I had it in my head when I was watching. I mean, Fury almost got knocked out. It seemed like it was a wrap. And he really got the shit kicked out of him. I think it was the 9th round. And then kind of he definitely won the 12th round. The 11th round, I remember 2 of the judges gave it to him. 1 judge didn't, which was super suspicious. But I don't know. It was a split decision, but it really wasn't. Like, I don't think anybody watching that fight thought, oh, I wonder who won. Fury's face looked worse. Everything looked worse. And I just think Usyk reminds me so much of Pereira in the UFC, where it's, you just watch him and you're like, I don't know what the answer is to try to beat this guy. At least in UFC, you could try to take the guy down and get him on the ground. With Usyk, I almost feel like it's got to be somebody like Bacoli just overpowering him and using like a huge size. I'd bring Bacoli up. Like just a huge size disadvantage because he is like a blown up cruiserweight. And maybe that's how to beat him. I just don't see Fury doing it.
You got to, first of all, at some point, you should sit down with Bacoli because he's an incredibly engaging guy. And I know you love him. He's interesting. Usyk would beat Bacoli 12-zip, by the way. Like, Usyk would not make the same mistakes Jared Anderson made and stay within range of that right hand. He would just
be zipping around.
He'd be zipping around him, using feints inside, outside.
How dare you disparage Bacoli?
There's a lot of guys I want to see Bacoli fight. He's a really funny guy.
But here's the thing.
Fun to watch.
Nobody wants to fight Bacoli. He couldn't even get on the February 22nd card. They had to like push him to the next card, but he was supposed to. I mean, it seemed like Dubois was going to be the natural whatever. He didn't want to fight him.
Dubois does not want to fight. Dubois does not want to fight Martin Bacoli. Not with, like, Dubois sitting out there going like, all right, there's maybe a rematch with AJ, which is worth 8 figures, There's maybe a unification fight with the winner of Fury and Usyk that could be worth 8 figures. I am not getting in the ring with Martin Bacoli and risking getting my head taken off when I've already had some issues with knockouts in the past. You're not doing that. So look, Usyk. What I love about Usyk is that he kind of gives away the game plan before every fight. Like when he makes these jokes where he's like, "Don't be afraid, Tyson. I'm not going to leave you alone." That is him telling you that he's going to be applying pressure all night. And pressure comes in different ways. Like it doesn't have to be this overwhelming, I'm going to put you in a headlock during every round type of pressure that we've seen from some brawlers. It can just be staying in your face and making you keep your hands up at all times and making you stay on your toes at all times. That's exhausting. Like Tyson Fury, I thought won the first half of that fight with Usyk. 4-2, could have been 3-3. But the pressure Usyk put on was overwhelming. And in the ninth round, it got up to him. When Usyk landed that first straight left hand, that was the fight right there. So he's going to do the exact same thing again. And if it goes back to Fury. If he's not as sharp as he's been at his very best, I think he's going to have a lot of problems in this fight.
Usyk has a lot of pieces of things that I've loved from guys in the past. Like as the fight goes on, it just seems like he shrinks the ring and figures out the exact distance, how to hit the guy with the little tiny punches that don't seem like a big deal, and then they kind of add up. But there's like pieces of Hopkins in there. There's pieces of Cesar Chavez in there. Like they're just those guys that just there's one fight the first 4 rounds, and then the fight starts to shift and you can kind of feel it. And I don't really know what the answer is to beating him, but I just know I'm going to be betting on him every time he fights. He's 37. I don't know how many more of these he has left, but I mean, if you look back at he's 22-0. He beat Joshua twice, beat Dubois, beat Fury already, could be beating him again. He was dominant as a cruiserweight. Go back to the 2012 gold medal and that whole era. Like he was beating all those guys. And I don't if he wins this, like what's next? Because you could fight Dubois and Parker are fighting February 22nd. So Zhang and Caballel. So maybe it's one of those two. Who's the next fight?
It's not going to be AJ, who wants nothing to do with Usyk. And AJ, to me, like they keep talking about like if Fury loses, you can make the AJ fight. Like we didn't just see AJ get clobbered over 5 rounds to Danny Dubois. Like right. We're just gonna forget about that happened. Remember the 3 in a row AJ won and not that one. So it's not going to be AJ. You beat Fury again. It's not going to be Fury. Dubois would certainly do it, but I mean, I think Usyk, if there was enough money on the table, would certainly fight Danny Dubois again, become undisputed champion once again. There could be events out there for him. Like everybody in boxing has been trying to find a way to do a fight with Zheli Zhang on mainland China. Like the amount of times I've heard about Zhang going back to the Bird's Nest in Beijing in front of 100,000 people. For a while it was Anthony Joshua. Well, hey, it could be Alexander Usyk that fights him there if Zhang can get a win in his next fight. So maybe it's something like that. But he will have quite literally have cleaned out the heavyweight division if he beats Tyson Fury for the second time. Or there'll be guys he hasn't beaten, but beating those 2 top guys twice, that will be an accomplishment. And you asked me, how do you beat Usyk? To me, there's only one way to do it, and that's to just apply unrelenting pressure to him. Because there have been times where Usyk has been in trouble. Like at cruiserweight, he had I think it was a split decision win over Maris Briedis, who's a physical guy at cruiserweight. The times that AJ had success against him was when he was the one putting pressure. He was the one letting his right hand go. I think it was like the 9th or 10th round of that second fight where he had Usyk in real trouble. Even early on, Fury landed some good shots on Usyk, just didn't follow up and chase him down. Go back even further. Derek Chisora, of all people. Derek Chisora might have given Usyk his toughest fight at heavyweight because through 6 rounds, he was just lumbering after him, in that fight. So if you are willing to just, go all in and commit on a pressure style, you can have success against Usyk. But if you try to box him, you're going to lose every single time because he is a better boxer than everyone at cruiserweight and everyone at heavyweight.
Which is one of the things that made Fury special was at his size, he was like kind of a sneaky good boxer, but not compared to this good. I'm glad you brought up Chisora. I think he's lost to everybody in the division at this point, right?
He's still going.
It's not over yet. So is there a cruiserweight that could move up?
Not. I mean, look. So Gilberto Ramirez is now a unified champion, and Gilberto's someone that people in the U.S. know a little bit about. Former champ at 168, title contender at 175. Lost to Bivol back in 2022 over in Abu Dhabi. He's a name in that division, and Usyk's fought in the U.S. in the past. That would probably be a pretty big fight if Ramirez wins one or two more fights. The other guy in that division is Jaya Pataya, who's super athletic, good power at that weight class. Still trying to build a name, I think, that's big enough to get someone like Usyk that's interested. So those are conceivable, possible fights, but I would make Usyk a big favorite against both those guys. Usyk too, Bill. The last fight, I forget what his exact weight was, but you could tell that in what was, I think, his fifth fight at heavyweight, he had grown into the weight class. Before, he was just going up in weight, and he was like 212, 213, 218. He was solid in the last fight. Like, he is a full-fledged heavyweight right now. And if he takes on a cruiserweight like Ramirez or Apataya coming up, they're going to have problems with his size. So, yeah, there are some decent names there, but nobody that I would make a threat at this point to Usyk.
Yeah, I remember that happened with Holyfield. It took him a couple to feel like he was a heavyweight, and then it happened. Well, on FanDuel right now, he's minus 166, Usyk, which I just think is nuts. I don't understand at this point in his career, from everything we've seen, how he's not minus 250 against everyone else in that division, just blind. There's not one person that he shouldn't be minus 250 against. So
I worry, Bill, but I worry about some of the scorecards were too close last time. Usyk, he needed that knockdown to pull out a decision.
Right.
There's a lot of money in a trilogy. That's a reality, right? Like if Fury wins, there's a whole pile of money. I don't want to do it, but I've seen enough in boxing to wonder, what could happen in a circumstance like this. I think Usyk's going to have to win clean.
Boxing gets fishy sometimes?
It gets very fishy. And I think more importantly, there's some bad judges in boxing, like really bad judges. And judging boxing is hard. I have to do it on an unofficial capacity, every week at DAZN. But some strange things happen on scorecards in boxing. And I hope we don't get that in this fight. I hope the right man comes out the winner.
Yeah, probably the maddest people get at you is either something you wrote about LeBron, or they didn't like how you scored round 4 in like the third to last fight on a DAZN thing. Right? People just go nuts about the scoring. I had to go nuts watching it. I get so mad.
Really?
Exactly,
but it's always on a micro level, right? It's like, I can't believe you scored the 4th round for such and such. Like,
right.
Let me go back and rewatch that, and I'll rescore it. But it's hard, especially some of these rounds where there's not a ton of action. And I think Usyk Fury, some of those rounds were hard to score, especially in the first half of the fight when there wasn't the kind of obvious action that you saw in the second half. But I mean, I just hope there's no controversy to this one. If Fury wins, great. Let's have a trilogy. I think it'd be awesome. But if Usyk wins, hope he wins clean.
Well, the other thing, when you're sitting close, you might miss like the biggest punch of the round because the ref blocked you, or, it's not an exact science. Before we go, we got to talk about the super card on February 26th or February 22nd. I don't know if there's been a card like this. Like the third, fourth best fight on this card would be the best fight on a Saturday night. We've talked in the past about how the Saudis and all this overseas money, and they're just like, we want everybody good to fight each other, and that's what we want. And this seems like the full culmination of that. This is one of the best boxing cards of all time. When you saw it all laid out, were you shocked? Like, they didn't even have room for Bacoli. They were like, "No, we're moving you over, moving your fight later." This is we have super middleweight, lightweight, welterweight, Beterbiev against Bivol, Dubois against Parker, Zhang's fighting Caballel. Like, it's a fucking crazy card.
It's the deepest card that I've ever seen. You go back to the 1990s, and Don King put on some unbelievable pay-per-view cards where they were 4 fights deep, championship level, high level stuff. We've never had a card that on paper goes 7 fights deep with all headliners night after night. And this is an example of the positive impact of the Saudis' entry into boxing. What we're going to see in the main event on Saturday is an example. I mean, having two fights between Fury and Usyk in 1 year is remarkable. Even more remarkable is the headliner of the February 22nd card. I mean, we had to wait 6 years. 6 years, both Beterbiev and Bivol were world champions. And they didn't fight each other because there's no money in it, because neither one of them has a real fan base. Saudis come along, they make a fight in October, and less than 6 months later, we're getting the rematch. Like there's a huge net positive for the Saudis being involved in boxing for boxing. I would say this, though. I don't know how necessary it is to have 7 fights like this on a card, because it's great if you want to watch all 7. If you are a true purist, if you're a diehard, you sit down at 11 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast and you're watching, Zhang fight, or you're watching Virgil Ortiz fight. It's great. Like I will spend my entire day, if I'm not there, watching that particular card. But especially in the US, not a lot of people are probably going to do that. And I do think there's something to the idea of spreading this stuff out, right? Like having 2 or 3 great fights on a card. And then a month and a half from that, then having the other 2 or 3 great fights. Like having sort of a schedule start
recurring
to build up
during a month.
Yeah. So you
but
get
don't
these
you feel
guys.
like this is UFC though? Like UFC has changed the thinking on this, because there will be some UFC cards that you could watch for 5 straight hours, and they kind of want that.
Yeah, but UFC is able to do that month after month, right? Like I don't know what the boxing schedule is after February 22nd. Like there's some fights I'm looking forward to, but nothing with the kind of depth that we're going to see on the 22nd. Like even like Shakur Stevenson, Floyd Schofield is a fun fight that would headline in Newark or in New York. Virgil and Madrimov, good fight in Texas. Like I think it's look. I'm excited to watch every single one of these fights. I wouldn't argue though with the idea of like, hey, let's push a few of them, a month from now, and
like
maybe a couple others. Yes, just divvy it up. Give these guys a chance for a little more exposure. It's great that they're getting the money. Like all these guys are getting paid, and in a sport like this, you deserve it. But I just worry about the exposure of a guy that's going to be fighting at noon Pacific in the U.S. That's the only thing I would quibble with.
Counter. This is like Thanksgiving. It's like, should we have sweet potatoes and mashed potatoes and stuffing? And like, fuck it. Let's just go for it. To me, this is like a once in a decade kind of card. I don't know if they'll be able to replicate this many fights in a row. I've never seen anything like this where you literally can't miss the first of 7 fights. And the best thing is Stevenson, who I think is my least favorite good guy to watch. And now he's buried on this card with 6 other fights. So I don't have to, be like, do I get it? I don't really like watching this guy. And now it's like he's just one of the many. But somehow they left out my guy Bacoli. So do I have to get Bacoli on a podcast? Try to pump him up? What do I need to do?
I think you should. I think he'd fly to Los Angeles to do it. I mean, he's got like this incredible story where he's from Africa, but he's kind of Scottish now, and he's got this great personality that comes with it. And he's been so avoided for so many years. So just to put a button on the card, it's a great problem to have, right? Like I'm excited about it. I want to see it. Everybody
You're working,
wants to
right? Are you working it?
I believe so. We haven't figured that out yet, but I was at the last
Hopefully.
Beterbiev Bivol fight. Yeah. It's a great problem to have. 7 hours of high level boxing is going to be awesome for the boxing fans out there. Like ultimately, that's what it comes down to.
I wonder, like, this card's so good. I wonder if you almost need 2 play-by-play guys. Is it too much to ask? It's almost like you have to go WWF, or they have the 2 different play-by-play guys for the 5-hour card. I don't even know if Gus Johnson would be able to go for 7 straight hours with boxing like that.
We did that whole Riyadh season card in LA, which I think was like 6 fights. Like that was a lot of, because that was a pretty deep one. You had, David Morrell fighting low on that card. You had a pretty good slobber knocker of a fight with Jarrell Miller and Andy Ruiz, low on that card. So these are long days, but if you are like a true purist and someone that just wants to sit down on your couch and is willing to invest 7 hours, it'll be one of the better days you'll have.
February 22nd. February turning into a surprisingly good sports month. It used to be like the dead month, but now all of these different places have figured out like they moved the trade deadline up somehow against the Super Bowl, and then a whole bunch of stuff happening.